for early, I was accepted into Stanford, and then for regular, I was accepted into Harvard, the UPenn Wharton School, Princeton, Penn, and then Yale also. And then I was also accepted into the UT Austin's 40-acre scholarship program, as well as UC Berkeley for the Regent Scholarship and USC for the Presidential Scholarship. I applied to these schools as an economics major, and something that I also want to pursue in college is also East Asian Studies as a minor or potentially a joint major. And for future career aspirations, I definitely want to go more into the business world, whether that be consulting or even like private equity or venture capital, or even want to work on pursuing government and business interactions abroad. One thing that I tried to focus on throughout high school was not necessarily following I guess like the typical way people thought that college admissions should be approached. And so I did try and get good grades in high school, and I had a good like SAT score and ACT score and things like that. But one thing that I wasn't necessarily trying to achieve was perfection. And so I really tried to spend a lot of time pursuing extracurricular activities. And I just wanted to pursue them to the best of my abilities. And so for me, one thing that I really tried to highlight in my application was my emphasis on my Mongolian background, which is something that is extremely important to me, actually. And for me, I think not knowing like any Mongolian people my age around me was definitely a motivation for me to wanting to highlight my background and showing that for schools that I can provide some sort of Mongolian representation to their community. And so through that, I focused a lot of my time in high school on social entrepreneurship activities, as well as focusing on Mongolian studies and connecting that to art history. So for my applications, like I said earlier, I tied it into my Mongolian background. And so through that, I made sure to connect my Mongolian background to social entrepreneurship and as well as Mongolian studies in my essays. And so for some of my essays, I talked about, and for my main Common App essay, I talked about my experience going back to Inner Mongolia and seeing how there was a lot of education discrepancy between my family living there and going to school in Westlake. And so I talked about how I noticed that. And then from there, I began a book project called 1,000 Books For. And slowly emerging from that book project emerged a 501c3 nonprofit organization that I founded that tried to empower young change makers in developing areas through different education and entrepreneurship initiatives. And so I talked a lot about my journey through founding 1,000 Books in my Common App essay, and I tied that into just the background that I had of being Mongolian, of like being a female, backgrounds that are traditionally unrepresented in the business world. And I also talked about how I was able to give like a TEDx talk. I was able to speak at South by Southwest EDU, just talking about the importance of starting early when creating your own initiative and having the ability to start early because like you are young and people are willing to help you out. So I just talked about just increasing that representation of minorities within entrepreneurship is something that I really learned through my journey through 1,000 Books. So that's what I talked about in my main essay for my Common App. And then different schools had like different supplementals, but mostly for my supplementals essays, I focused on, I did a class at Westlake called Art History, and I've been taking art history for the last 4 years. And so when I was visiting art museums, I noticed how there wasn't any like Mongolian art. And so I kind of found it my mission to find Mongolian art myself. And so I began like a year-long research project trying to find Mongolian art through different East-West cultural exchanges. And I talked about how I was able to meet with a bunch of different professors across the US and across the world, also just asking them for help for Mongolian art. And then I also talked about how I was able to travel like the Mongolian like Silk Road, the way that Marco Polo did, from all the way from like China, Mongolia, and slowly I'm trying to make my way over to the West, the way that Marco Polo did. So I just talked about how even though I didn't necessarily find Mongolian art in museums, I kind of found it my way to find Mongolian art myself. And I talked about how I took initiative when things weren't necessarily presented to me. So I really tried to highlight that in my whole application, that I took initiative when it came to kind of exploring my identity as a Mongolian American. So for a gateway, I remember going into the college admissions process and I was like really confused. I remember opening up like the Common App portal the entire time and I was like super confused how college admissions work, mostly because I don't have any siblings and my parents didn't really have to go through like the college admissions process in the US. And so the Gateway program basically helped me through the entire college admissions process from the very beginning of deciding like what schools to apply to, like what majors, helping me with like my resume also, and then also helping me brainstorm different essay topics on what to write about. Because even though I had like a general idea of what I wanted to show in my college essays, I still wanted more help in portraying it in a better way and showing like my like true authentic self in the best way that I could. And so I think that the Berkeley program really, even like the Gateway program itself, really helped me with kind of fine tuning my essays and making sure that my essays showed different parts of who I was, and all making sure that everything that I wanted to come across in my college application was represented well and accurately in my college essays. So it definitely really helped. And I know that without joining the Gateway program, I definitely wouldn't be like in this position today of like choosing from like, I guess like the top schools in the US and having to pick one from that. So I'm really thankful for all the assistance that I got at Berkeley over the summer and how that's helped me now. And also one thing that I really like about the Gateway program is that it starts in the summertime. And so it really helps to start your essays in the summer, because I know a lot of my friends were really stressed out about having to write a bunch of essays while also having to manage their senior year classes, which are known to be pretty hard. So it was a good thing for me to get a lot of it done in the summer. And that way I didn't have to really worry about the stress of like applying to colleges in the fall. From the very beginning, throughout high school, I was just kind of pursuing things that I really loved. And so I wasn't necessarily thinking about how do I get into like these top colleges.
Okay.
And so I remember like before the Gateway program and having that initial consultation, I was thinking about going to like UT Austin. I was really set on going to UT Austin. I didn't think about like schools like Stanford and like Harvard were possible. So it was really nice to have that like affirmation from the very beginning from the Gateway program, and also just working with everyone there. One thing that I would say is, from all the people that I've talked to that have gone into like Harvard and Stanford, I think the biggest thing for them is doing things that they loved and just really pursuing them to the best of their ability given their current circumstances. So I don't think there's necessarily like a formula to follow for college admissions. I don't think that like you should join this club because like this other person did it and got into that school. I think that the most important thing in college admissions is to find something that you really like and just really become like passionate about it, and pursue it to the best of your ability, like I just said. So going into high school, I kind of was just planning on being like a doctor because my parents kind of told me to be a doctor. And so I didn't really have any background in business or entrepreneurship or nonprofit organization at all. And so I would say my project began very organically as just a book project. But over time, one thing that I've realized that I'm pretty good at is like asking for help. And so anytime that I was like struggling with this part of my organization, I reached out to like a mentor in the US and asked them if they could help assist me with it, whether that be like graphic design or fundraising or kind of like rebranding my organization. And so one piece of advice that I would give is like, don't be afraid to reach out. And because I was able to get help, I was able to turn it from like a book project into an actual 501c3 nonprofit organization. And I had like my friend's dad, who is a lawyer, kind of guide me through the process of filing stuff for a nonprofit organization. And so I think that if people are interested in starting some sort of initiative, I would say honestly, just to start it, see where you go from there. I wouldn't go into it with the mindset of necessarily starting a nonprofit organization, but see how you can start small from the very beginning, and then from there kind of gradually expand and see, oh, like this opportunity looks cool. Maybe I can have this person join my organization and see how they can help. And so I think the process of growing very organically is something that is extremely important. And I just want to stress that like no matter what background that you come from, like if you see something that you don't like in your community, like you have the ability like at your age to make a difference. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be a nonprofit, but if you see something that you don't see as right, you have the ability, like at a certain age, to make a difference. Like no matter like what like socioeconomic background you come from, like no matter like what like racial background you come from, it's like I wouldn't necessarily worry about those sort of like injustices, but rather just see how you can kind of make a difference in your community. And I think that's something that is like really important. And yeah, and so I've been able to rely like on my community a lot. And for my like teachers and stuff like that, at least for my letter of recommendations, I have been talking to my two teachers who I got recs from for the last 4 years, just about like in the classroom also, but also about like the work that I was doing with my nonprofit and seeing how I could get help from them, seeing if they could guide me through this and stuff like that. So I got to know them really well outside of the classroom setting as well. And so just really forming those relationships with people that are authentic and seeing if you can get help like that is like one advice that I would give. Honestly, like just to start small and like I honestly like I can't drive. Like I'm just now learning how to drive, which is pretty bad considering I'm 18. But yeah, just like try and start small in your community. Like there's no reason to necessarily have like this big goal. I mean, it's good to have a big goal, but it's not necessarily to do like everything from the very beginning. Just start small and see where it goes from there. One thing that I would suggest is to I guess read about like different things online, see what sort of problems may exist in your community. And the second thing that I would say is just to talk to people online. I know that a lot of what I did like in high school, I did it internationally. And so I had a lot of like phone calls for my nonprofit organization, whether that be like organizing an event or organizing a conference. A lot of it was done remotely. So you don't necessarily need to have that like face-to-face in-person interaction all the time. And so I would definitely say like talk to people around the world, and like if you have an idea, see if you can work together with someone else to see if you can do something about it. And so I think that now, because like everyone's in quarantine, it's like the perfect time to talk to people around the world and just kind of see if you can kind of connect with people like that. And yeah, and so I think in terms of like finding people, you could definitely reach out to people in your community. You could find people like online, like let's say like on like Reddit or something, who are interested in the same things that you are, and kind of connect to them there. And so I definitely say that there's a lot of opportunity to connect to people worldwide. And now that like since everyone's in quarantine, like I'm sure like people would be willing to give their time also and help you. One thing that I think I'm trying to approach like college from the angle is, I think like college is not necessarily the end goal. Like there's so many different things that I want to pursue when I'm older, and I think that whatever college I go to, it'll help me with pursuing that, but it's not like the end goal. So I'm really trying to make sure that I take advantage of like all the amazing opportunities at whatever school that I go to. And I think that that's also like one piece of advice that I'd give to high school students is just to take advantage of like all the opportunities around you. Like teachers are willing to help you out. Friends are willing to help you out. So just make sure that you just take advantage of all the opportunities that are given to you and see how you could use that to do good in the world.